Good morning, everyone who's joined us already. I just want to double check a few things with anyone that's online already. Could you just pop in the chat for me and let me know if you firstly can hear me and secondly whether you can see my screen? I've got a yes and yes, so that's positive. Good start to a Friday morning. Great. Even though it's been a year since we've all been using Zoom more regularly, you still panic about a last minute technical hitch, don't you? So we're about a minute before. What I plan to do is give it about, I don't know, 2 or 3 more minutes just to let everybody join. And we've got a few more people coming in now, I can see. So we'll give it another couple of minutes so that we can we're expecting a few today. So we'll just, if you don't mind bearing with, feel free to make yourself a cup of tea if you haven't already. So for anyone that's just joined, I was just checking that you can all hear me okay and that you can see my screen. If you could also pop in the chat where you're joining us from today, that would be great, so that we can learn a bit more about where our audiences come from. So if you just pop in the chat, I don't know about you, I'm in Worcester, it's raining, it was lovely yesterday, and this morning not so lovely. If you could pop in the chat maybe where you're joining us from. Oh, good morning, Simon, I hope you're well. So it'll be raining with you as well, I imagine, seeing as you're near Worcester. Steph from the Crewing Company and Horsley Hill Farm. And what's the weather like with you? It's raining. I think it's raining all over the UK today, very sadly. Still got a few more people joining us. So we are at 10:01 by my iPhone. So we'll give it another minute or two just to let everybody join. I will also warn you, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of people, as we are all working from home at the moment, which I'm sure most of us are. I have the addition of a new puppy at home who is currently asleep behind me, but I apologise in advance if she gets a bit vocal. I'm sure we've all had funny stories on Zoom where our pets or children have embarrassed us. No, I can't hear you. You were all on mute, so yeah, that's fine. So if you have anything that you want to ask me, or if you want to pop a question at any point during the presentation today, please do pop it in the chat and I will come to them at the end if I haven't covered them already. So no, I can't hear any of your background noise. It's only me that's going to be embarrassed if my puppy decides to start barking at nothing. So again, I apologise in advance about that. I'm hoping she's asleep and will give me a good half an hour, 40 minutes of silence. Okay, so we are at 10:03, so I think we'll get started. So welcome to anybody who has just joined us. As I said, if you want to share with us in the chat where you're from, what the weather's like with you today, that would be great, just so that I make sure that everybody can hear me okay. We are recording the session, so therefore if you want to pass it on to any colleagues or contacts afterwards, I can send out a recording for you and a link to that, so just to let you know. So I allocated about an hour for today, but I don't actually think it will take us that long to get through the material that I've got. So I am welcome to kind of answering questions afterwards. I'm thinking that the presentation part of this will take about 15-20 minutes. And then if there's any questions going through, then we can cover those off either during the presentation or afterwards. So please do pop questions in the chat as we go. If I don't come to them immediately, I will definitely come to them at the end. If there's anything that you want to ask afterwards as well, please, I will pop my contact details in the chat right at the end so that you can email me and ask me any questions privately if you wish. So COVID safe guideline certification, providing a peace of mind. So just a little bit of background for those that don't know us. I know there's a few of us that do, or a few of you that do joining us today, but we are specialists in helping SMEs improve their businesses through the implementation primarily of ISO management standards and training services. We are a family-run business, so the pictures that you can see there are my mum and dad and sister, and we operate from Worcester, and we cover the whole of the world really, so we operate all over the world, particularly in the UK and Ireland. And we're very proud members of the Hereford and Worcester Chamber of Commerce, where I have already delivered this webinar to some of their members as well. Getting straight into it then, what is it, COVID safe certification? So we are a certification provider, and this particular certification provides assurance that a business has put in place the specific measures to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus in accordance with the government guidelines. And now we also put this in accordance with a specific ISO management standard that was issued last year called the 45005, which I will go through some of the specifics of in a moment. Yeah, this is a certification that provides reassurance really to key stakeholders that the business is doing everything that it should be doing from a duty of care perspective. So the aim of the certification is to reduce the risk of transmission of the virus, increase the confidence, safety and trust of the workforce. With the government announcing the roadmap, we feel that this is even more kind of critical to businesses and their plans going forward. With the third lockdown, nobody really knew kind of when people would be welcomed back into the workplaces. I know a lot of organisations have had to keep people on site throughout the whole of the lockdowns, but then there's a lot of people still working at home. Probably saw on the news yesterday, NatWest, was it Nationwide? Sorry, Nationwide had announced closing one of their, I think their Swindon office to make everybody work from home, or they can work from the office. So people are now kind of looking with this roadmap at what they can do. And there's going to be a number of staff or a number of the workforce that are still feeling hesitant about going back into the workplace. And this is designed to kind of help alleviate some of those issues or worries. Allows the business to demonstrate that it's addressing its risks using a systematic approach. For anyone that already implements ISO management standards, either through us or another body, you'll be very familiar with that phrase, systematic approach. So this is around having proper processes and procedures around how you're managing the safety of your workplace. It provides external assurance to key stakeholders, including clients. So some of your operations might be in homes with the general public, so that might be your workplace. So providing that assurance to your clients, key stakeholders, the board, that you are doing everything from a kind of a peace of mind perspective. Clearly, it's verification that they're meeting at least the government guidelines, and I say that importantly, at least the government guidelines. As we all know, health and safety law is still there; it hasn't gone away. So making sure that you are meeting the bare minimum of the government guidelines, and hopefully we'll be addressing how you can improve on that. And importantly, it's a framework that you can put in place to enable effective and timely adaptation to the changing situation. I feel that there has been a little bit more of a plateau at the moment with regards to how often change happens. those of you will remember last year when everything was changing so quickly. It feels like change is still there, but at a slower pace. And obviously, as we come out of lockdown, they've left these 5-week gaps. So we have 5 weeks to really adapt ourselves to the situation. And this certification can help put that in place for you. So what's involved? So initially we would look to do a remote assessment of your key controls, your key documentations, and the actions taken to make sure that your workplace is COVID safe. We will check your processes. We will check your risk assessments. The risk assessment is probably the biggest document that we will look at on this remote assessment because it should cover quite a lot of the requirements. We'll look at what training or communication that you're giving to your employees and your stakeholders. We'll check the use of the correct PPE dependent on your business. Obviously, a lot of this is business dependent. So, you know, there's a big difference between a small service sector organisation operating one office to a large, say, manufacturer or engineering company operating in multi-offices across the UK. So, you know, each business does have its own set of requirements. Once the remote assessment has been passed, so once our assessor is deemed that from a paperwork perspective, we feel comfortable that you are covering or you've thought of everything that you need to, we will come on site then. So the remote assessment is really to kind of deem the safety for us to come on site, but also that you've done the basics, you've put the basics in place. So once the remote assessments, we will have to come in physically and visit the site and see those processes in action. So, you know, all of the kind of social distancing measures, all of the hygiene measures, all of the, I suppose, kind of one-way systems that you might put in place. We want to really see that in action. And we'll be checking that against the risk assessment that you've presented to us as well. And if required, if you're not quite sure if you're not there or not, or you feel like there's more that you need to do, we can help you future-proof your systems. We can help you improve on your systems. So we can provide support and guidance as well to make sure that you feel that everything that you should be doing is being done. Interestingly, I had a conversation with a client about this last week, and one of the reasons they're looking at it isn't because they're worried about their staff coming back, because actually all of their staff have worked from the offices or worked from the premises quite happily throughout the whole of the pandemic. But from their perspective as a leadership team, they felt that they needed that peace of mind, that third-party reassurance that they're doing everything that they should be doing. They feel like they are, but they just want us in there to do that final check for them. So I mentioned I've always got to mention an ISO standard being an ISO implementation body, I suppose, but there is an ISO standard that has been released last year called the 45005. For those of you familiar with the ISO series, this runs in line with the ISO 45001, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Management Standard, which we've been implementing for many years. So this is kind of a subset of that standard. And it's the framework that we utilise to assess organisations. It's an international standard, international best practice, basically. So it's the best thing for us to assess against, as well as the government guidelines. And this particular standard looks at the general guidelines, says SAIL there, should say safe working during the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, for anyone that's familiar with the ISO standards, you'll be quite familiar with some of these terms that I'm going to go through. I will explain some of those as we go through for anyone that's not familiar with the ISO standards. But the first thing that a business needs to look at is the planning and assessment of risks. I mentioned earlier that this is really the kind of the crux of the documentation that is expected to be in place, things that you're supposed to have recorded from a health and safety perspective. And part of that is understanding the context of the organisation. So understanding, demonstrating that you can understand, you know, where your risks arise from, who is at risk, what the kind of significant risks are, what the the inference of those risks are, so what that means for the organisation. So just demonstrating a good understanding of your organisation, and that can be done quite simply through a thorough risk assessment. There needs to be leadership and worker participation. So there needs to be demonstration that the leadership team is on board with all of these new kind of ways of working or new procedures that you'll have in your office. So that's just a demonstration to us that your leadership team is committed, and also that your workers are committed. I use the term worker. That could be employees, subcontractors, actual workers, you know, from a kind of a legal perspective, the term worker. Just making sure that they are involved and they are communicated with, and that you have their participation on the new procedures that you're putting in place. It covers things like your general planning, so that's kind of across the board in terms of all business planning. It will look at making sure you're assessing the risks of all the different workplaces you might work from, so your physical premises, your home workers, other people's homes. So if you are an organisation that has to deliver your services in homes, and also if you are a business that delivers anything mobily as well. It'll look at the different roles of the people within the organisation, so particularly around who looks after your health and safety. It'll look at the different activities that you undertake as your business. As with all health and safety, you look at emergency preparedness and response. So what would happen in an emergency if you had an outbreak? You know, if something, if an incident happened, what would be your response procedures? How does it escalate? And also the planning stage. So this, again, a lot of this can get covered by the risk assessment. So you can have in there your kind of mitigating actions if this was to happen. Scenario planning, this is what we would do. So not only scenario planning, but also as and when the government make changes to the restrictions. Obviously with the roadmap, that makes it a lot easier because we have an idea of what they're planning to do. Then making sure that your business is up to date with those plans as well. It will look at how you deal with suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19. So managing illness in the physical workplace, managing illness of workers, what your procedures are, what your sick pay policies are, making sure that you've kind of really thought about, you know, the impact of having a potential outbreak at the business. Whilst the certification is aimed to kind of reduce that, as we know, you know, nothing's infallible, and they've still got personal lives, so people can potentially still bring illness into the business, and it's just about how you deal with that. You know, what your rules are with regards to, you know, if somebody is feeling poorly and they haven't had a test yet, making sure that there's full communication around the team on that. And that includes, you know, what your rules are around testing, contact tracing and quarantine. So do you test on site? Are you planning on having, you know, getting the lateral flow tests? I don't know if anybody else received the email, but this week I received an email from the government saying that I could apply for free lateral flow tests to have into the business. We are an under 50 employer, so there was an indication that we could go to our local testing site and pick them up, but you can also apply to have them sent to you, especially if you're over a 50-person employer, so that's worthwhile having a look on the government website for that. It'll cover things around psychological health and well-being, working from home, mental health. You know, we've been doing a lot on mental health as a nation over the last kind of few years, and this is really kind of to make sure that we're covering that aspect of it. You know, being in isolation at home, it isn't great for people's psychological health. So it's making sure that you've got mechanisms in place to be able to pick that up with your employees, having regular catch-ups with them, especially ones that are never coming into the workplace. It looks at inclusivity, it looks at resources, and then throughout it all, woven throughout the whole of the kind of the requirements is communication, good communication, you know, and that in this sense, it's looking at it from, you know, what communication do you have around your premises? But what I would also say throughout all of the clauses is where it's looking at communication in terms of keeping your team, your stakeholders up to date with your current processes and how you're managing the safety and what your duty of care looks like. Then, unsurprisingly, it covers the hygiene, so you know, your cleaning requirements and how you're keeping your workplaces hygienic, and your use of PPE. And again, that's very dependent on what sort of business you are. You know, kind of a retail environment will need the screens, it will need the masks, it will need the, you know, the managing the numbers inside. I'm sure you've all been to Tesco's, or some of you may have been to Tesco's or Aldi or the Range. You know, they're still kind of operating, well, in some of those places they're still operating a maximum numbers policy. So things like retail would look at that. Things like engineering, you know, you might look at how you're going to redeploy your workstations and how close everybody is together. So, you know, each business really does differ on that. Then there's an area around looking at your general operations. So a lot of people will have already returned to the workplace. So that piece might have been done around the first return to the workplace. But if you haven't yet, you might be a little bit concerned. So we can help, you know, kind of alleviate some of those issues there on you know, how you're going to get everybody back first returning to the workplace, what sorts of communication you need to send out to them. Like I said, a lot of this is covered by the risk assessment, but there could also be some additional policies that you need to kind of put in place. So things around entering and leaving the workplace, moving around work zones. Again, a lot of this is dependent on how big your premises is. If you were in large or multi operational, obviously there's going to be a lot more work to be done than if you're in a much smaller one office style situation. So use of common areas. So for example, you know, we have a policy of only one person in the kitchen at any point in time, only 2 people in the toilet. You know, they're kind of like kind of rules, I suppose, that we didn't have pre-COVID. Looking at when you're allowing meetings or visitors to come to the workplace. If you work with the public, what your kind of additional kind of measures need to be for that. If you're expecting anybody to do any work-related travel, and if you accept deliveries as well, and what your kind of methods are around keeping everybody safe there. And then, as with all standards, this is around monitoring and evaluation. You might not get it perfect first time, but this is around learning from your mistakes. It very much still works along the plan, do, check, act model, which a lot of you will be familiar with if you've got ISO standards. So it does fit quite nicely in with any operational procedures that you've already got in place. It seems like a lot, like I feel like that might kind of overwhelm people, the lists that I've just gone through, but actually a lot of it can get dovetailed into your existing health and safety policies. You know, you don't have to have a separate COVID risk assessment. You can combine it and actually add it into your main business's risk assessment. So a lot of this will just be picking up and enhancing things that you already do. Some of it may be creating things from scratch. I appreciate that if you haven't got those things in place already. But this is all around improvement. This is all around evaluating your performance and improving on that performance. So coming back to the certification itself, the businesses will achieve a certification, a successful verification to show stakeholders. So it's something physical that you can show your stakeholders that you've achieved. And you'll also receive a logo that you can display around your offices or on your email signatures, proving that you've had a third party come in and check you against all of those different areas. Why bother? You know, you can do all of this without the certification, and I'll be perfectly honest, I would advocate that you do, you know, as much as you can with regards to getting people back into the workplace. The certification just provides you with that third party reassurance. It can help those members of staff that are suffering from either mental or physical ill health through working from home, because, you know, I'm lucky I've got an office set up at home. Not everybody does. People are still working off sofas, dining room tables. You know, from a kind of ergonomic perspective, that's not ideal on people's physical health. So, you know, you can encourage, you know, less issues, you know, long term by getting people back into a proper office kind of feel and setup. It can help improve your team's confidence. You know, you're showing that you're actually going over and above what you need to do in order to make sure that their safety is you know, paramount. And it can improve business performance. We operate from a dual screen workstation at our offices, but not everybody has that facility at home. And we know that productivity is increased by having a dual screen. So our performance will increase if we have as many people back as possible working to dual screen. That's not to say we're not implementing a work from home kind of option, which we are. We're building that now into everybody's job roles. But from a business perspective and a business performance perspective, the more people that do operate from our offices on a regular basis, you know, the better really with regards to how our business can perform. And I'm sure there's different things depending on what your business does, especially if you're a manufacturer or engineering where you have to have people on site. You can't have them work from home. So I've just put a bit of an indication of costs on here. So, you know, if you've already gone through this process, if you've already been working on this throughout the whole of the pandemic, you know, you'll probably have a lot of these procedures will have been developed over time. So for that, it's just a simple £450. We're not differentiating on size of business for this. This isn't about us having this as a massive revenue stream. This is about us actually just offering something to customers to be able to get people back into work. So for us, we're looking at keeping our costs minimal. So it's 450 for the initial remote assessment, and then 650 per physical site visit, or consultancy day that's needed if there is anything missing. So, you know, if you've already done a lot of this work, it could be quite as simple as having the remote assessment and having the physical site visit. If you feel like you're missing things and you need some help and support, then we can provide that and provide you with documents and templates and guidance and consultancy to be able to kind of really get yourself up to a level that where you want to be. So I did mention I was going to drop my email address into the chat, which I will do. So, so for anyone that doesn't know me, my name's Jennifer. So I'll pop my personal email into the chat for you now. Yes, you are able to have a copy of the presentation. Sorry, I'm just coming into the chat box now to have a look if there is any questions. So that's my email address. So if you have any questions regards to the COVID safe certification, please direct them to myself in the first instance. And if there's any questions that you wish to ask now, I will give you a minute or two just to type them in. What time are we on? Oh, 24 minutes past 10. So I'm keeping to good time. I'm hoping, my aim was to give you all back a bit of time today on a Friday. Do we have specific regions you provide services to? With regards to this particular certification, yes, it is UK based and Ireland based only. So apologies if you are from outside of those areas. We can still help you. We can still help you from a consultancy perspective, but we wouldn't necessarily be able to provide the certification. And that's because we can provide the consultancy support on a remote basis. So we would be able to provide you with that. I look after 6 sites across the UK. How would you tackle this issue? Okay, so similar way to how we would tackle an ISO, putting an ISO management standard in, we would first work with head office to implement all the correct processes and procedures, or double check those processes and procedures, and then we would have to do a site visit across all of those sites. I can talk to you afterwards though, Cliff, if you wanted more detail on that. I can have a one-to-one with you and we can discuss how that would work specifically, because I'm aware of your business. So, okay, so if there aren't any other questions that you wish to pose to me now live, then I would just say, please take down my email address. Please have a look on our website. This isn't something we're overly advertising. We are just getting the message out via these webinars, via a bit of social media. So, you know, please do kind of contact me directly for more information. And obviously, if you've just got any questions, you know, regarding any of your processes and procedures, we'll be happy to answer. You can't see my address. Oh, okay, I'll pop my email address in again. It is, I'll read it out as well. It's Jennifer, JENNIFER, @ ISO, Indigo Sierra Oscar, QS, Quebec Sierra, Ltd, as in limited.com. So I will end the webinar now. Thank you all very much for joining me today on this very wet Friday. I hope that's been useful. As I said, to anyone that's outside of the UK, we are more than happy to provide consultancy support on getting these procedures in place. Unfortunately, at the moment, with the restrictions on travel, you know, it's harder for us to travel internationally at the moment, as you can imagine. I know that they are allowing international travel for work purposes, but I feel like it's kind of essential travel only, so I'm not sure whether we'd be covered under that, but we're more than happy to support on a remote basis for consultancy for anyone that's outside of the UK joining us today. Thank you very much. Yes, have a great weekend, everybody. And I will be ending the webinar now. Thank you.